You know, I've brought this topic up a couple times over the last few days and the last week on the RPG Brigade channel and the new video response channel of Tim's, and made a hash meat of it. I had to go back and redo the video, and I wasn't satisfied with the redo, so here's a third stab at it. A lot of common threads or similarities happen between those who want to write a story or a novel and those creating material for a game, an RPG. If you're a game master, you are an amateur writer. There's no getting about it. You're going to do gobs and gobs and gobs of writing. You're going to make notes, whether there's linear notes or very specific and bullets of this, and this, or detail scripted pieces, so you understand what it is you're trying to achieve, what the goals are, what your intentions are. You're setting up the plot for the day's gaming, or the week's gaming, or the campaign. And in some degree, we've got a little bit of an overview of the big campaign, and then a greater overview of what's going on, and then maybe an ongoing set of notes from the previous encounters. That way we can continue to make sure that we're linking things along. A common mistake among would-be writers and game masters is to either add in or create or represent something, a person or an object or a location, for whatever purpose that we set out to do originally. And in some cases we didn't have any purpose in mind. We threw it in there, and then it gets ignored. It gets left sitting on the shelf, if you will. It's something that can become problematic. It's either at some point it becomes a loose end, an untied, an unresolved problem, a missed opportunity, or some irritation to the reader, i.e. gamer, player, who's going to go in his or her head's going to keep going back to this, whatever happened to. In the writing circles, they have several different terminologies for it. And the best one I ever come across was, don't leave an unfired gun laying around. And another version was something about cats. So I always translated in my head, don't leave unfired cats laying around. Now, what I'm talking about here is, okay, I create a scenario where the adventurers are going to go from here to there, and in the process, while they're going from here to there, they pass by a woodland glade. In the middle of it's a stone with a sword sitting in the middle, a magic sword shoved into a stone. Or I'll have a NPC at a tavern mention this magic sword sitting in a stone out in the woods, and the party walks past it. But because of one reason or another, they don't investigate. They just keep going on to whatever it was they were going to do. But in the back of their heads, they know that there's a magic sword sitting in a rock in the middle of a forest. We don't know why it's there. We don't know what it's doing there. We don't know what it's capable of. We don't even know if we should be acknowledging it's there. This is an unfired cat. We now have an unfired cat laying in the background, tearing up the furniture, making a rumbling noise from the couch, otherwise causing mischief that irritates everybody in the room, whether it's sublime or overt, and it can be a problem. So, the game master or the writer had no intentions of that magic sword ever playing a role in anything. Has no intentions of it, using it or utilizing it, didn't have any backstory for it, doesn't have any details or stats for it, has no real good reason or excuse for it to even be there, other than it just came up in the moment while describing the scenario. This is a problem, or can be a problem. If we just brush it off as nothing, well, it takes away from the storytelling prospect, or the power of the immersion, the believability. So if the character, if the GM or the writer is just spewing out random garbage and has no intentions of justifying it or cleaning it up or somehow or otherwise setting fire to it to draw attention to it, it shouldn't be there. It shouldn't put it there in the first place. Same problem crops up when we go into a tavern or a bar or a setting, and an NPC, a colorful NPC, walks in, makes a bow, says something, and then just seems to be forgotten. There's another unfired cat. I have done this several times. In the excitement or the debate or the discussion or the argument that breaks out with the players, we become diverted from the opening gambit or the sideshow gambit that came in, and suddenly there's this loose end that's just left hanging out there. And mostly, if you go by and nobody brings it up again, and you forget it's there, then okay, it's not an issue. Now that's great in gaming. Now if you're writing a novel, I guarantee you it's going to come back up again. Somebody somewhere is going to come up and say, "Hey, what was up with that guy? Why did that lady come over and do half of a speech, and then what happened? She just, in the mid-speech, ceased to exist. Everybody forgot she was there. She just melted into the floor, put on her magic ring, and disappeared, and nobody noticed. What have you? That's an unfired cat. That's a problem. It's not necessarily a good problem either. It can be an issue. It's hard sometimes to, especially when you're ad-libbing, when you're firing from the hip. If you're working from a well-defined script, you shouldn't have these loose ends hanging around in the first place. The third unfired cat is the lost MacGuffin, the lost piece of bait, the big thing. Once again, the magic sword that we promised the players they could have when they got to the end of the adventure, and they get to the end of the adventure, and you go, oh, well, that was just a ruse to get you here. There was no magic sword in a rock in the forest. There's no missing princess to save. The dragon just sent out a rumor that he had a princess for hire, and was just using it to lure people in so he didn't have to go out and get his lunch. You're just take out. Well, that can really hork off a player or two, and it's happened to me once or twice, especially in my novice days. Made the mistakes of using fictional bait or an unfired cat to lure these people into a scenario that with no intended payout. And that's just bad. It's bad gaming. It's bad writing. It's a bad idea to do, and becomes a trust issue with the players. The players don't. If you're trying to be a trickster as a game master, you got to be real cautious, because you can find yourself without a game group. One or more of your people might get frustrated or fed up with this never-ending running gag that you're going to present things that doesn't pan out or isn't finished up or doesn't occur. Or you come off as being lazy or unprofessional or somehow incompetent. I mean, all that's applicable. All of it's a scenario to consider and to take into account. So I caution, whenever possible, go back and look at your script or your notes, rewrite them if necessary, because sometimes you can come that second go around, they can be improved. Now there's a danger to it though, because sometimes we can rewrite something that was actually really good, and there was no need to tweak it, and we can't help ourselves. I'm in that category. When I go back to rewrite a paragraph or a chapter or a script for a game, and the initial offering was actually pretty solid, and I find in my head, oh, well, I can do better, I can do this, I can change that, and without meaning to, I've completely rewritten what I had planned on, and the second offering or second draft turned out to be weaker than the first one. And the fact that it took me a long time to recognize I'm capable of that, meant I did a lot of cheesy or questionable stuff that could have been better. But that's part of the learning curve. That's why we do what we do. We get better with experience and with craft and with study. Therein sets the bar apart from some GMs and others. So, unfired cats, fire them off. Cage them up, make a pet out of them, but don't leave them laying around.